I want to tell you guys about the time I met Quinton Flynn and made hundreds of people want to come after me with torches and pitchforks. Before I get to that though, I feel like I need to preface this with some backstory. But there's a lot to go over, so if you don't want to listen to a string of wild tangents, you can skip to the chapter of the video labeled, The Incident. So, I think it was Knights of the Old Republic that made me realize I was a fan of certain voice actors. The first time Bastila Shan spoke, I remember thinking, wait a minute, I know that voice. That's Naomi Hunter. And then there was Samurai Champloo, one of my favorite shows of all time. Oddly, when that show aired in the States, Steve Bloom was voicing 3 different protagonists on Adult Swim. Spike Spiegel in Cowboy Bebop, Roger Smith in Big O, and Mugen in Samurai Champloo. So even back in 2005, Steve Bloom was doing way too much. The thing about voice actors is like, you have these unseen people that you only know by their name and their voice, right? And when you encounter a new character with that same voice, that character gets added to this giant conspiracy board in your mind. So over time, as more and more characters get added to the wall, your brain constructs this 4th dimensional being consisting of a singular voice projecting from 1,000 different mouths. It's like some straight up Old Testament style shit. Okay, that might be a terrible analogy, but the point is, voice acting is a profession that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And since most of the videos on this channel deal with the Metal Gear series, I thought this was appropriate to talk about. Out of all the voice actors from the Metal Gear games whose careers I follow, the one that I'm the absolute biggest fan of is Jennifer Hale. I mean, who else? But as luck would have it, Quinton Flynn is the only one that I have a funny story about, so here we are. I played the hell out of MGS2 back in 2001, but after that, I don't remember hearing anybody voiced by Quinton Flynn until Naruto aired on Cartoon Network in 2005, where he played Iruka-sensei, or as I like to call him, Sensei. I know he did a ton of stuff between 2001 and 2005, but for whatever reason, I didn't see any of that, until I recognized him as Sensei. I remember my eyes lit up, it was like, oh hey, it's Raiden. That's pretty cool, I guess. After that, in 2006, I heard him as Reno in Advent Children, and it was thanks to Flynn's portrayal that Reno became my favorite character in the FF7 series. Around the same time, he played Cone in the Bleach dub, which I never got into, despite the fact that I was a massive Bleach fan at the time. I think, you know what it was? I didn't like the fact that they localized Shinigami to Soul Reaper, but they left Zanpakuto in Japanese. Then everybody in the dub proceeded to just butcher that word every time they said it. I'm getting off topic. E3 2006. Konami unveils a 15-minute cinematic trailer for MGS4, punctuated by some of the best fight choreography the series has ever seen. Almost as good as the Twin Snakes. Everybody watching wanted to know who in the hell this certifiable badass was. And then at the end of the trailer, this happens. Wait a minute, that's Little Rai Rai? Something you gotta understand is that from the beginning, Raiden was created to be attractive to young women. In Japan, they have this archetype called a Bishonen, which basically means pretty boy. And it goes way past the point of androgyny, like what Japanese society considers conventional good looks for males are straight up feminine features, to the point where sometimes the only way to tell that a character is a male is by their voice. Unless you're the President of the United States.
You're a man?
An interesting characteristic of the Japanese pretty boy archetype is that they all have the same voice. It's a deep, smoldering baritone that sounds like the melted caramel bass line of smooth jazz by the fireplace. Just look at Alucard from Symphony of the Night, the prettiest pretty boy in all of Pretty Boyopolis. Listen to how he sounds in Japanese.
自ら滅びの道を歩む。その世界の住人にあらざる者は手を下すべきではないと。
This is where the English casting director of the game messed up. They were clearly trying to capture the same silky smooth sound of the Japanese voice actor, which is why for whatever reason, the English version of Alucard sounds like he's just a few years away from retirement.
I'm certain that was a Belmont. So he says he's the lord of this castle.
Thankfully, when it came time to cast for MGS2, somebody at Konami realized that, in the West, characters like Raiden should sound youthful and exuberant. He's a pretty boy, not a pretty octogenarian. Because of that, Quinton Flynn's performance as Raiden was pitch perfect. The character caught a lot of flack for sounding too whiny, leading a lot of people to compare him to Anakin Skywalker. But at the time, nobody knew what Raiden was supposed to represent. He's a loser. He's all the Metal Gear fanboys who thought they were a badass super soldier just because they got the big boss rank in MGS1. Now, I've said numerous times that MGS2 did a terrible job of delivering that message, but I'm not talking about that right now. At the end of the day, yeah, Raiden's annoying when we're first introduced to him. Sure, he makes you want to stab your own eardrums out with a pair of scissors. But from an actor's standpoint, and in terms of the story that was being told, that was the right way to approach that character. So then that Japanese trailer for MGS4 drops. Back then, I used to watch that trailer at least 5 times a day, and at one point I remember thinking, damn, that's crazy. I wonder who they're gonna get to play Raiden. Keep in mind, in 2006, the video game industry was a completely different landscape compared to what it is today. Japanese publishers had absolutely no allegiances to Western voice actors. Look at all the different people who played Leon Kennedy since 1998. Even David Hayter, the most iconic voice in video game history, doesn't have job security. So when this better, stronger, faster version of Raiden was revealed, I thought for sure the character was going to be recast. I just couldn't imagine this super badass cyborg ninja doing all this cool shit. Then he opens his mouth and goes,
"We've managed to avoid drowning."
Then at E3 2007, Konami released an English trailer for MGS4. Towards the middle of the trailer, the music swelled before cutting to a cinematic title card, and then out of nowhere,
"You too, immortal."
No, I just don't fear death.
What was that? What was that just now? Looking back, in terms of the new stuff that was revealed in that trailer, nothing was more shocking or surprising than that line. And here's what's brilliant about it. Unlike the rest of the trailer, there are no visuals or music to distract you, allowing you to really concentrate on Flynn's performance. He corrupts and distorts his own voice into this sinister, pessimistic rumble, and you can tell just by the gravel in his throat that this character's been through some shit. Without any facial expressions, body language, or any other type of visual cues, Quinton Flynn told a story about how this character had been literally transformed by the passage of time, using nothing but his voice. That's the power of voice acting. And you know what's ironic as hell? In the Japanese version of MGS2, Raiden sounds kinda cool, right?
100まで数えたら目を開けろ。向こう側についてる。
Yeah, well, in the Japanese version of MGS4, Raiden sounds like a punk-ass little biznatch.
違う。死を恐れていないだけだ。
To me, I just don't fear death, is one of the most iconic lines from the entire Metal Gear franchise. I had this friend a while back, and we would have entire conversations comprised entirely of Metal Gear quotes. At one point in time, whenever we called each other, whoever answered would go, "You too, immortal?" And then without fail, the response would be, "No, I just don't fear death." And then for years after that, the default reply to any yes or no question was, "No, I just don't fear death." Hey, I'm going to the store. You want anything? "No, I just don't fear death." No matter what field somebody works in, the people that inspire me are the ones who give a damn, those willing to go that extra mile. And Quinton Flynn's performance as Raiden was nothing short of inspiring, because I could tell he had spent a ton of time and effort developing that voice so he could bring that character to life. With that single line, it became abundantly clear to me that that guy takes his job extremely seriously and he cares a lot about honing his craft. A lot of voice actors working in the video game industry just don't have that level of passion and dedication. You know what I just realized? At some point, this video turned into a retrospective for a voice actor. Has that ever been done before? Am I making YouTube history right now? Alright, I've drawn this out long enough. It's time to talk about the incident. I told this story once before during a stream, then I posted a clip of it on Twitter, and much to my surprise, Mr. Flynn himself actually saw that tweet. Not only that, but he retweeted it and pointed out that I had actually botched a couple details. So to try and redeem myself, I'm going to tell this story in as much detail as possible, and hopefully I don't bore you to death in the process. It all went down a few years back at an anime convention in my hometown, where Quinton Flynn was one of the guests of honor. What I didn't understand at the time is that when Quinton Flynn shows up at your con, it's a big deal. Like most convention centers, this place had what we called the main hall. It's the biggest room for panels and events, so this is where the heavy hitters are going to draw the biggest crowds. At the same convention where Quinton Flynn was a guest, the con also had a big chunk of the English cast for My Hero Academia. Now, if you don't know, My Hero Academia used to be the biggest anime on the planet. It's not anymore because season 3 was hot garbage, but before the pandemic, the show was a worldwide phenomenon. I want to say about half of all the cosplayers in attendance were dressed up as a character from that show. Naturally, the convention had a huge panel for those voice actors. There were 11 actors from the show on stage for that panel, including Mr. Over 9000 himself, and the guy who plays Todoroki. Remember when I said half of all the cosplayers at the con were dressed up as My Hero characters? Well, half of those were dressed up as Todoroki, if not more. Suffice it to say, the Macadamia panel was the main event of the con, the thing that people traveled from all over the West Coast to see. It took 11 voice actors from the biggest anime on the planet to fill the main hall. Quinton Flynn was able to do the same thing all by himself.
With a box of scraps!
Actually, I'm underselling it. I checked the schedule. Every other panel that was held in the main hall at this convention had a group of people on stage. Out of over 30 guests, Quinton Flynn was the only one with a panel just for him. But that's not even the half of it. I was at the My Hero panel. The place was packed, but there was still plenty of space left. At Quinton's panel, after all the seats were filled, a gigantic crowd formed in the walkway behind all the chairs. If the fire marshal had known what was going on in that hall, the entire convention would have been shut down. Now some of you might be wondering, how the hell does a lone voice actor command that much of a following? Well, let me break it down for you. It's actually pretty simple. You ready? Here it is.
Got it memorized? 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 Got it memorized?
So now, it should be pretty obvious why all the seats filled up so quick. It's because most of the people in there were using 2 chairs. One for them, one for their Keyblade. If you've ever been to one of these cons before, you know there's nothing more dangerous than a Kingdom Hearts fan. And the most feral and unpredictable members of the bunch are the yaoi fangirls, where Axel reigns supreme as the king of the tops. Or Seme Osama if you're a fucking weeb. The reason I bring any of this up is to demonstrate that you do not mess with Quinton Flynn. Within the wonderful world of weeaboos, he's a national treasure who must be protected at all costs. But I didn't know that going into the con that weekend. And thank the gods I didn't pull the stunt I did during the panel in the main hall, or I wouldn't be telling this story right now. Those Fujoshi would have torn me to shreds. The incident actually occurred a couple days before that, in a smaller, more intimate setting. But there was still a pretty sizable crowd that had gathered for the panel. It was a Q&A panel, so basically people line up, then the guest of honor just answers questions for an hour. But these little kids, man, they ask the dumbest questions. And you can't be mad at them because you have to imagine how much courage it takes for these socially awkward little kids to stand in front of their hero and speak while a couple hundred people silently judge them. So they'll get to the microphone and they'll ask something like, "Who do you think would win in a pie eating contest, Axel or Sebastian the Quab?" And Quinton's response to these questions is one of the most genius things I've ever seen a guest do. He hits him with the Uno reverse card. I'm gonna say it exactly the way he does. He goes, "Well, I don't know. What do you think?" The first time I saw him do it, I thought he was secretly saying to the audience, "How dare this kid waste my time with this stupid bullshit?" But that wasn't what was going on. Here's the thing. The last thing you want to do in a situation like this is take sides and risk disappointing the person asking the question. Because clearly there was a certain answer they were hoping for him to give, so what Quinton did was give that kid the opportunity to tell someone they admire their thoughts, their opinion, and the focus gets shifted away from Quinton back onto them. They become the star of the show, and afterwards they feel validated and uplifted because their hero cared about what they had to say. That's a con memory they're going to keep with them for the rest of their lives. So not only is asking "what do you think" one of the smartest things I've ever seen a guest do, it's also one of the kindest. That's how I found out Quinton Flynn is playing a game of 4D chess in his head at all times. He's 10 steps ahead of everybody. Like in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, then Quinton Flynn said, "Hey, you missed a spot." That guy's just on a completely different level. Now I got a few objectives when I ask something at one of these panels. First, I try to throw the guest a curveball and ask about an obscure character that they wouldn't expect and hopefully the audience has never heard of. That way, you clearly demonstrate that you've been closely following their career and you appreciate them for the smaller roles they play, not just the big names like Axel or Raiden. Secondly, I try to ask a question that gives the person an opportunity to talk about how much skill goes into their craft. Again, it's about showing appreciation for what they do. In the process, you make that person look that much more legendary in the eyes of the audience. My third objective when I ask a guest a question is to be a total asshole. Here's how I do it. Most people, when they get up to the mic, they take a couple seconds to adjust the stand, or they get on their tiptoes so they can reach it, or one of the staff has to come and help them. Not me. I rip the mic right out of its socket. This establishes my dominance over the room. I never understood why no one else does this. Apparently it's my trademark. So there I was with the mic in my hand, and Quinton Flynn was hovering about 3 feet off the ground, just looking all radiant and ethereal. That's a joke. He was obviously up on a raised platform so the people in the back could see him. The problem is, whereas most guests will sit behind the table on the stage so they can create a relaxed atmosphere, whenever Quinton Flynn does a panel, he does the whole thing standing. So the intimidation factor is turned up to full blast because he's rocking this triumphant power stance. It wasn't actually a power stance, the guy's just got good posture. Anyway, for my question, I wanted to know about Henry Cooldown, Travis Touchdown's rival/brother in No More Heroes. Despite being born in the States, Henry grew up in Ireland, so Quinton speaks with an Irish accent in No More Heroes 1 and 2. So I asked what kind of research or dialect training he did in order to play that role, or if there was someone from his life that he based that character on. Glad to have finally gotten an intelligent question, Quinton excitedly explained that his father was actually from Ireland. And before he could even finish his thought, I cut him off and went, "Oh, he was! So he's not anymore." Now, what I was trying to do was to make that question feel more like a short interview. I had hoped that I could parlay that into a follow-up question. Is your father not Irish anymore because he was naturalized? Do you have dual citizenship? Something like that. It never occurred to me until I said it out loud that what I said could mean what everybody knew it meant. Immediately after I said that, I was overcome with intense feelings of guilt and regret. So as Quinton's judging eyes are bearing down on me from up above, a storm was brewing behind me. I heard a few chuckles from the audience, which I was excited about, because in comedy, any reaction is a good reaction. But it wasn't until later that I realized those weren't happy chuckles. Those were nervous, wincing chuckles. Those chuckles were of the, "Oh no, what the hell have you done, you monster" variety. Quinton didn't skip a beat though. He was calm, cool, and collected the entire time. Thanks to all the horrified gasping in the room, I only caught the last 3 words of what he said, but it was something to the effect of, well, I failed to see the relevance, but if you must know, he did pass. Just the way he said it, and how he piled on the sarcasm so thick like that, he was instantly able to divert all the hateful eyes away from me and back onto him. That was the first time I'd ever seen somebody pull aggro in real life. He knew full well I had just unintentionally committed a massive faux pas, but by maintaining a sense of humor and rubbing my face in it, really letting the sting of my failure take root, the mood of the room shifted instantaneously. The nervous chuckles from before changed into genuine laughter. At my expense. Most people, you'd imagine, would have a tough time talking about a subject like that. But Quinton Flynn's just so damn charismatic that he was able to make a room full of people laugh at the passing of his father. I can't describe that as anything else besides a superhuman ability. After that, I couldn't consider myself a fan of Quinton Flynn as a voice actor anymore, because I no longer thought of him as a voice actor. To me, he had become an important role model, an honor bestowed only to a select few people in my life, including Courage the Cowardly Dog and the SR-71 Blackbird. Falling flat on my face like that really had a positive impact on my life, because even though I had made a complete idiot of myself, I learned more from that exchange than any class could ever teach you. As a time-traveling space pirate, I could easily go back and save myself from dying of embarrassment, but would I ever want to? No, I just don't fear death.